Hello and welcome to this webinar brought to you by Switchboard, a one-stop resource hub for refugee service providers. As folks are trickling in, just make yourselves at home. We're really excited to talk about this topic today. Just want to say thank you so much for joining us. All right, so let's get started. Today's webinar, again, is brought to you by Switchboard, a one-stop resource hub for refugee service providers. Our session today is entitled Promoting Supportive Mentoring Relationships with Newcomer Youth. Today's speakers, we have two members of the Switchboard team here to talk to you about this topic. First, we have myself. My name is Rob Callus. I am a Switchboard training officer with a focus on community integration. I consider myself to be a lifelong educator with several years of experience working in instructional design, global health, and refugee resettlement. I previously worked with refugees for World Relief, where I managed a youth services program there that was both RSI and Refugee Youth Mentoring funded. I speak Swahili and Spanish, and I am ESL certified. I'm also joined by my colleague Selina Máté, who is Switchboard's program manager for digital content. She has experience with refugee youth mentorship, social media management, and WordPress development. Selina holds a bachelor's degree in history from Huntington University. The both of us also worked prior to being at Switchboard at the same agency where we started and sustained a really successful refugee youth mentoring program. And so that's why the two of us are so excited to bring some of the lessons we learned from that experience to you all in this session. Just some quick tips for you all. I know we've been on Zoom for quite a while and many folks are used to this, but we want to be really intentional about the kinds of settings we'll have available given that this is a Zoom webinar setting. So first off, you are joining on listen only mode. You may switch your audio between your computer and phone at any time under audio settings in the lower left corner of the screen. If you can't hear what we're saying, do be sure to test your microphone and speaker to make sure it's not just a systems problem. Due to the large number of learners on today's webinar, we've disabled the chat box. However, you do have the option to send messages to the speakers and co-facilitators via the Q&A box. So please keep an eye on there for messages as they come through. Once we answer the questions, they'll appear for everyone in real time. If your question is not showing up, it's just because we haven't gotten to it yet, or we may also be saving time to answer it towards the end of our session, which there will be designated time for open Q&A at that point. Additionally, please keep your eye on the chat for messages from Switchboard and links to various resources that we'll be mentioning throughout. Lastly, I'd like to mention that today's session will run for 1 hour and is being recorded. You'll receive an email with the recording, slides, and recommended resources within 24 hours of completion. The webinar transcript, along with the recording, will also be posted on the Switchboard website within the following days. So today's session, agenda-wise, in terms of narratively speaking, will follow a lot of the processes that you all might experience when working with mentors and mentees, and that we'll be talking about recruiting, matching, engaging, and closure processes, and our learning objectives reflect that as well. So here are our learning objectives for today's session. So by the end of today's webinar, you will be able to, 1, determine factors that contribute to strong matches between community-based mentors and mentees. 2, identify strategies for effective mentor engagement to ensure consistent support of newcomer youth. And 3, apply practical skills in supportive mentoring relationships, including strategies for maintaining boundaries and navigating case closure. There will be a couple ways that we'll be engaging with you all in this webinar setting, and one of those ways is through Slido. So Slido is a live polling platform that you will see throughout the session. So we want you to pull out your phones and scan the QR code, or you can open a web browser on your computer and type in slido.com, and it'll prompt you to enter that code right there. So once folks are in, give a couple seconds for you all to pull out your camera app and scan the QR code. We'll have just 2 questions to start out our conversation today. Our first question is for us to get a sense of who is in the room for this webinar today. So we want to know who you are. Who is it that's coming to this webinar to draw life and meaning out of this? So which of the following best describes your role? And if, maybe you wear many hats like many of us do in this sector, but pick the role that fits most clearly with who you are and what you do. All right, lots of RYM program coordinators, and I know many of us go by different names, right? One thing we do want to note is especially if there are any folks who are managing RYM programs or coordinating them, but are AmeriCorps volunteers, we do have an option for that as well. And I know many programs do use AmeriCorps or other sorts of fellowship-based programs as well. All right, but we're pretty solidly, heavy on RYM program coordinators. We're glad you're here. But it's nice to see other resettlement agency caseworkers. I think a lot of these principles that we'll be talking about today don't have to just do with the Refugee Youth Mentoring grant and those who might find themselves in the caseload. There will be a lot of themes that cross over in terms of volunteer engagement, in terms of case closure and case management. So we hope that this webinar has something for everyone here. We're going to move on to our next question using Slido again. So we are talking about mentoring, right? And we all, hopefully, if we have created space for ourselves to find mentors in our life, and we're now in the space where we're encouraging folks to have strong mentoring relationships, I'm hoping that you all have mentors. So think of your own mentor, either a past mentor or someone who currently still walks alongside you, and let us know, how would you describe them? This is a word cloud, and you'll notice if you type a word that's already on there, that word will get a little bit bigger. So feel free, even if you see a word on there and you feel it's true of your experience, feel free to add that word as well. All right, inspiring, supportive, and motivating. Empathetic and compassionate were words that were showing up quite a lot. Love to see that. I love this idea of a safe space, that a mentor is a safe space for you to go to share through, share what challenges you're experiencing, and, can create space for some of these other words as well. And supportive, yeah, of course, huge word, right? And support looks different for everyone. And so hopefully some of the strategies that we talked about today will create space for us to ask, like, what are the kinds of supports that a mentor can and should provide? All right, good stuff. Well, thank you all. This is a great first start to engagement. Well, like I said, we'll have a couple other ways to engage, so do keep your eye on the screen, just in case we have a poll that pops up or something, you never know. But we're gonna move on to our first objective. As I said before, we will be largely following the path of sort of mentor engagement from start to finish, all the way from recruiting stages all the way down to case closure and what happens when mentoring relationships come to natural ends. So we're going to start out with that recruitment process in our first objective, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Selina Máté. Selina, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. I am so excited that all of you are joining this webinar today. And I'm, like Rob said, I'm really excited to share some of the knowledge that we learned as we built the youth mentorship program in Durham, North Carolina. And so welcome, and thank you for having me as well. So we're going to kick it off with mentor recruitment and matching. So it's, when you get your program, whether it is a new program or it is a continuing program, this is going to be the first step for most of you as you're building your program. So we're going to be looking for volunteer mentors and matching them with our mentees. And so how do we do this? So let's dive into our first section, and we're going to do a case study. And so these are our very fictional, made up mentees, Amina and Bilal. So let me introduce you to these two, and we'll be working with them throughout the webinar. So Amina is a 15-year-old who just arrived from Sudan. She has a education up to 6th grade. So she is an English language learner. She hopes to become a doctor, and she loves singing and fashion. Bilal is our other mentee that we're looking for a mentor for. He is 21 years old. He's from Afghanistan. He has an education up till 9th grade. His future goals are undefined, but he does love soccer and cooking. And so we will be revisiting these mentees throughout the entire webinar. All right, so we're going to go on to some of the recruitment strategies. And so for me, when our program first started, I really had to rack my brain of like, how can I find these volunteer mentors that are out in the community? Because I know they exist. I know that they're out there. How can I invite them into this space with my students and with our program? So there are a couple different ways that we were able to engage our volunteer mentors. So the first one is using your agency, utilizing existing volunteers. And often they're going to be really excited about a new opportunity to serve maybe a different age group or a different need that the agency is experiencing. So this is relying on, this current existing volunteer base. And once you know that this program is starting or you're going to be recruiting, sending out those emails, however y'all talk to your volunteers and saying, we're going to be needing new volunteers for this program. That's how we got a good portion of our volunteers in our program. And it was purely that. It was folks who were either working with younger kids or our older clients. And they were so excited, like, oh gosh, I'm super passionate about young adults. I'd love to jump in on this new opportunity and just haven't had the opportunity to do that. Second, local bulletin boards. So posting flyers on local bulletin boards at coffee shops, it might seem like an old-fashioned way of recruiting, but this is something that I did when I first started in my last role, and it really paid off. I would say probably about 10% of our volunteers were just from coffee shops and local third spaces that they saw the flyer and they were like, oh, that sounds like a fun opportunity to give back to the community. And so I would take maybe one day a week when the program was first started, just to go around and grab a cup of coffee and post it on the bulletin board. The third strategy is reaching out to local agencies and nonprofits in the community. This one is so important. I think that it's very similar to the first one as relying on that existing base, but sharing the need for mentors with agencies in the area, it can be successful in two different ways. Some agencies don't know that the program is in place, and that can lead to referrals for clients and mentors. And so this is agencies that might work with families or even nonprofits, maybe not even resettlement agencies, but nonprofits that are working with families that are in the community that maybe your agency doesn't know about. And they're like, oh, that's so exciting. Not only do we have volunteers who are excited about this, but we also have this client that maybe we were unaware of at your agency. And so I will say that was very important when we started our program, to reach out to the community members, and you'll find maybe agencies that you don't even know existed. And you're like, oh, well, that's a great new connection and network. And so that it's good to open those pathways for both referrals of clients and mentors. So the last one would be databases and virtual recruitment. There are many free volunteer databases out there that you can post your opportunity to. One of these would be mentoring.org, which we will reference throughout the entire webinar, and it is in the recommended resources as well at the end. Mentoring.org, they focus directly on pairing potential volunteers with mentorship programs, and then they also have a lot of resources for building programs. And it was very useful to me on the front end of building the program, and they have conferences and all of that. So we'll drop that link as well in the chat. But utilizing agency social media channels as well to your advantage, just putting that all out there so that it's word of mouth. Everybody in the community knows that this is starting, and creating graphics to really, I guess, show the need for mentors in the community and how to get in touch with you. So once all of your tactics have been successful and you have a pool of mentors that you are very excited about your program and excited about jumping in, you're going to want to identify effective potential mentors. So you might have many people who are interested. Maybe not everybody's going to be the best potential mentor for your program, depending on the needs of your clients and the needs of your program. So we're going to, jump in by screening these mentors with background check. Of course, most agencies utilize the background check, and that's the traditional, history. However, I would suggest to go beyond the background check and screening mentors for biases and just overall feels of how they would be best supporting your mentees. And so one of the things, and I was very fortunate to have enough time to do this on the front end, but I would have coffee with mentors that were interested in joining my program and just kind of explain the needs of my programs, the needs of some of my students, and ask them, what their hobbies are like, what they do in their day-to-day, these things that a background check is not going to dive into. It also gives you a feel on who the mentor is and who you can pair them with as in the relationship. And so it helps with the pairings as well. And some people you might find are not the best fit. Some I would say beyond that, prioritizing commonalities is very important. So same gender pairing should always be prioritized. When those aren't available or possible, look into peer mentoring or mentorship groups. So in Durham, at our program, we found that sometimes the numbers were a little off as far as we couldn't do one-on-one. Also, one-on-one mentorship sometimes creates different hurdles. And so we went with more of a group mentoring structure for our program. Pairing mentors who speak the same language as the mentee can also lead to a successful match, as they don't have to rely on a third party to relay information, and they can have conversations between just the two of them. Other similarities should be prioritized when possible. Some great pairings between mentors are the ones that have similar career paths or hobbies, and this can be expressed in the mentee's intake as well, and when you're getting to know the mentor. So when students are unsure of what they'd like to do in the future, pairing with maybe a multi-passionate mentor might be a great way to expose your mentee to possible paths. And last but not least in the similarities, pairing a mentor with one that has maybe traveled or experienced their home country can be beneficial. For example, once I left the program, I became a volunteer mentor, and I was paired with one of my former students who was from Guatemala, and I have a lot of experience in Guatemala and speak Spanish. And as a Latina woman, I was able to connect with her, and we have a long-standing relationship even to this day. And so pairing based on those commonalities, it shows that it's so important to just get to know both the mentee and the mentor. Last but not least, to have an effective potential mentor, ensure that your volunteer mentor understands the structure and requirements of the program as well. This is probably the first element of an effective potential mentor match, because it's crucial for the successful pairing. The mentor should understand and embody and be eager to fulfill the hourly and emotional commitment that comes with being a mentor in the program. And so this is often identified through a conversation saying, this is what is required of our mentors. We have an hourly requirement, and we can of course be flexible. Nothing is ever going to be super rigid in this, but understanding what your mentor is expecting of the program and the mentee. And so you want to approach that very early on. You don't want to have a mentor that's thinking, oh, you have 1 hour a week when you're expecting 5. So that's very important. Finding mentors can be a complex process. And like I said, you're never going to get the absolute perfect combination of people, but you can find some mentors that are ready and dedicated to build lasting relationships with your mentees. So don't be too picky, but these are some general suggestions that you could go about with when identifying effective potential mentors. And just to wrap it all up, some of the importance of strong matches are when you take the time to identify these strong matches and you're pairing them and being careful about it, these are some of the things that you can see come from those strong matches. So strengthening the parent-youth relationship, fostering positive social relationships with teachers and peers, increase motivation and a sense of academic confidence and efficacy in school. This is something that we saw a lot in our program. And when you build that relationship with teachers, you can see your students start to get really confident in the classroom. And this is often a result of their mentor being willing to tutor them and help them in that area of their life. It can facilitate acculturation and access to resources and provide a lasting bond and trusted American friend, which is a phrase that we used to use a lot in our program for the mentee and family. And so when you're carefully matching, these bonds typically go beyond just the mentor-mentee relationship, but the family is often very welcoming of the mentor as well. And so you really want to make sure that you're taking all of this into account, because you could be potentially matching a lifelong friend. And that's a really cool situation. So we're going to revisit. So everything we just learned, we're going to revisit with our mentees from earlier. Just a little recap. We have Amina. She's 15 years old. She's from Sudan. She has an education up to 6th grade. She's an English language learner. She hopes to become a doctor, and she loves singing and fashion. So what we're going to do today is we're going to identify the best match for Amina. So we have 3 potential. We've done all of our hard work. We have the mentors rolling in, and they're all excited. So we have 3 on our list right now for Amina. So we have Anna. She's 45 years old. She's a data analyst. She enjoys hiking and outdoor activities. We have Zane, who's 27, a physician's assistant, and he enjoys playing guitar and traveling. And then last but not least, we have Naomi, 30-year-old. She's a CNA, certified nursing assistant, and she enjoys reading and running. So we'll give you guys about 15 seconds to identify. There should be a Zoom poll that pops up, and we will identify who would you match Amina with based on all of the things that we just covered. All right, we got about 10 seconds left. Awesome. So it looks like we have about 62% of y'all have chosen Naomi. So if I were the YMP coordinator of this program, I think that I would agree and I would pair Amina with Naomi. Naomi might not share the same hobbies, but she is in the same career field that Amina thinks that she would enjoy. Naomi might be able to set Amina up with shadowing opportunities, can answer questions about medicine, and is the same gender. This would be the ultimate match out of these options. The second best option would be Anna, because we don't want to do a male-female pairing. Zayn might have more in common with Amina than Anna, but it's best to safeguard both parties, and we want to prioritize that same gender match. Zayn might be a great resource for Anna to connect, or Amina to connect with in a group setting, and that's something that as the coordinator you could tell the mentors, this might be a great connection. Maybe your two mentorship groups can get together for dinner, or you guys can just connect at one of our group settings. Awesome. We're going to move on to our next matching practice with Bilal. So revisiting Bilal, he is a 21-year-old from Afghanistan. He has education up to the 9th grade. His future goal is undefined, but he loves soccer and cooking. So the three on our roster are Matt is a 6-year-old. He is in communications, he's a communications director, enjoys hiking and outdoor activities. We have Zayn from the previous example, and we have Isaiah, 23-year-old male. He's a college student and he enjoys woodworking and playing sports. So we will do this again. We'll have a Zoom poll pop up and you can go ahead and select which one you would pair Bilal with. Awesome. All right, so we have kind of split on some of the choices, and this was kind of a trick question. The situation is a little bit less obvious than Amina's situation. If I were the coordinator, I would try to put Bilal in a group. So I would choose Matt and Isaiah. In my experience, I've had fewer male mentors than female, so male groups tend to be the best option for our young men. We would ultimately pair these two mentors with a group of male mentees, and I would try to pair them all together, kind of to give Bilal a more broader experience. And so Isaiah is a college student, so he might not be able to dedicate as much time in the program. We can be really hopeful about it, but that's just in my experience. And Matt might share a couple of the hobbies, but he might be able to give a better scope of career and give wisdom from his longer experience in the career world. And he still enjoys those outdoor activities just like Bilal does. The pairing could provide Bilal with diversity in age, experience, and hobbies, giving him a great opportunity to explore what he would like to do in his own career and education, while having even more people, the more the merrier. So that's what we would do. All right, I will be passing it back to Rob, and I'll be back with more case studies later.
All right, thanks, Selina, for starting us off on there. And strong work, everyone. Just to say that often this isn't always going to be 100% right, but y'all are looking for the right things in your selections. So I think Selina's example of picking two mentors and using a group for Bilal among other mentors can be really useful, or mentees can be useful. And some of those creative approaches can be really awesome for connections made for the youth you're engaging with. So you've got your mentors, you've matched them successfully. How do we keep our mentors engaged? So like I said before, this will dance into some territory with general volunteer engagement, but we're going to be gearing this towards how we can specifically with Refugee Youth Mentoring programs, keep mentors engaged and staying really, really in touch with their mentees, both during the program and beyond. So one of the things that I use personally, and I know there are a lot of models for sort of measuring and supporting volunteers is that I've used this model of making sure that volunteer mentors or volunteers in general feel heard, valued, effective, and connected. So what do I mean by this? Let's start with heard. When a volunteer mentor is having an issue, a concern, whether it's logistical, whether it's personal, does the mentor know who to reach out to? Do they know that when they reach out to someone that their concern will be listened to, respected, taken seriously, and sort of problem solved together? That's, just sort of a base level, is making sure that your volunteers feel heard. Of course, respecting that you all as refugee youth mentoring coordinators and other caseworkers and other staff may be available in that 9 to 5 time, but do you have ways in which you can create space for your mentors that you're working with to have space and time with you? Next, we want to make sure that folks are feeling valued. So does the mentor as an individual, as a person, feel appreciated by your organization and by their mentee, right? So this can be as simple as making sure that you have a really consistent process of gratitude and appreciation, whether it is, providing meals at meetings that you have, if you have the budget for that, whether it's through just, affirming specific things that you say, hey, I saw you put in the volunteer hour tracking that you went and helped so-and-so with their homework for an hour. Thank you for doing that. That's really helpful. Making sure that their contributions are noticed and appreciated. Next, we want to make sure that they feel effective, right? So if we're looking and spending this time that Selina mentioned towards finding really good mentors and finding shared hobbies and things like that, we want to make sure that people's individual experiences, gifts, and talents are able to be utilized and make a positive impact on their mentees. We don't want them to feel like, I don't feel like I'm making a big difference. We want them to know that their individual gifts and talents make a solid, tangible impact on their paired mentee. And we also want to make sure that the mentee knows to be expressing their gratitude as well, that they understand the commitment that mentors are making as well. Last but not least, we want to make sure that volunteer mentors feel connected, right? So what are their reasons for even doing this in the first place? And do they line up with your organization's or your program's goals and mission? Making sure that folks feel really, really connected on a missional sort of level in terms of motivations and values can keep folks engaged and retained for longer periods of time. Like I said, there are a lot of models for volunteer engagement that are really helpful, whether it's the CARE model, whether it's McClellan's, social motivators and things like that. But this has been something that's been really helpful in my practice. And I'll be sort of applying these to some of our strategies as we go through for sort of troubleshooting some of those challenges that you might experience when engaging volunteers. So moving on to some of these more practical engagement strategies, there are a number of ways that you as a refugee youth mentoring coordinator can be supporting mentors. Some of the things that we thought of often when we were managing our program is, yes, we're managing this caseload of, refugee and other newcomer youth. However, it sometimes felt like we were having mentors almost in this case management side as well, when they would have issues and they would have concerns. What are the ways that we can steward their time and make sure that we're meeting their needs as well? Because if we're meeting our mentors' needs, those mentors are better able to meet the needs of their mentees. So here are just some ideas for ways to, like I said, keep mentors heard, valued, effective, and connected. First, we'd recommend providing ongoing training, and we'll talk more about what some of that training can look like. This way, folks feel as if, they're not just being paired with a mentee and then suddenly said, all right, good luck, have a good year. By having ongoing training topics, I'm sure in their relationships with their mentees, they will experience some of these challenges in cross-cultural communication, in navigating family structures, and they'll have sort of real life examples of those that they'll want to sort of workshop and talk through. So providing sort of in-service trainings on an ongoing, consistent basis, you're creating space for them to work together because they're probably not doing this. They're probably experiencing some of these things together, even if they don't have the same mentees. Next, from the get-go, it's very important to set clear guidelines and protocols. It's important to have standards to protect your mentors, your mentees, and yourself as someone who is stewarding this program. This way, mentors know what their roles are, and that's going to be really important for boundaries that we're talking about later on. Mentors are not meant to be full-time teachers. They're not meant to be full-time clinical social workers. We can't expect all of these people to be everything to their mentee, but we can set clear guidelines about what is the role of a mentor, who is a mentor, and what are best practices, what's appropriate for you to do in this role. Next, it can be really helpful to build community among mentors. There are a couple reasons for this. One, we're talking about that connected piece. We want folks to feel connected with the program overall and to say, oh, I'm not an island in this. There are other people experiencing the same program and who share values with me, who are doing this maybe for similar reasons, or in fact, they might be doing it for different reasons, and I have something to learn from that. Two, another reason why building community among mentors can be helpful is because maybe this can create space for group outings or things like that. You can say, oh, that situation where Zane has work experience that's relevant to Amina, if you're creating space for groups and communities among your mentors, they might be able to say, oh my gosh, we should do something together, and we can have sort of like a skill swap. And it can be very informal. It doesn't need to be like, switching them all together, but it can just be about creating space for future hangouts where everyone with relevant skills to each other can be in community. Next, it's important to conduct individual and cohort check-ins. During ongoing trainings and those other community building efforts with mentors, I think it's easier to do those cohort check-ins. You can just make that part of your practice, but it's also really important to create space for individual check-ins, both in like a consistent schedule, but also to have a practice of, if you see something happening in hour tracking, or if your mentee comes to you saying something happened, just creating a practice of being able to talk to your mentors and engage in discussion about whatever is going on. Make sure that they're feeling engaged. There may be things happening or not happening that you are unaware of, but by creating space to check in, you'll be more in touch with what those connections are looking like and what are the graces that are coming out of that. Last but not least, this one's very specific, but I want to talk about it from this more general lens of this idea of being connected. So one of the things that we always talked about was doing sort of like a logo design contest. So putting some sort of image or branding on your program that can be created by folks in the program, and putting it on swag if you have a budget for t-shirts, if you have graphics that you can send out, if you want to just put it in all your presentations, so then that way they have something recognizable, something that they can say, oh, that's something I know and value and trust. So that having some sort of buy-in in that way can be really helpful for engagement. In terms of returning to that idea about ongoing training topics for mentors, something that I first want to say is all of these that are here on this slide, we do have resources for these on Switchboard, and we'd encourage you to check our resource library and search for some keywords on here for resources that you can share with mentors. But these are really important, even on if it's a monthly or a quarterly meeting that you have, setting aside time to talk about some of these topics. So these first you have to do with, overcoming language barriers, crossing cultures, and how to do that sensitively. These are things that can be really hard to sort of quantify, but are really essential when we're talking about, if we have any pairings of folks who do not have shared culture. And then even for folks who do have shared culture, there's plenty to learn from these ideas, whether we can be talking about how to engage or how to be able to communicate effectively with folks who are pre-literate or with limited English proficiency, come up with strategies for that. Next, we might want to talk about the logistics of supporting mentees with job searching, college applications, financial aid. These are things that maybe mentors have done before, but they may have questions about, how exactly to guide someone else through it. In my experience, it's something that's really, the sort of thing that we're all sort of used to doing, and it's less scary than it seems, but often it can just be really helpful to create space to say, hey, when you're going through your mentee's resume, here are some tips and tricks that you can do in order to help them improve their resume. Or, you can just pretend to be an interviewer and you can print out a list of mock questions. So the barrier to entry to supporting this sort of opportunity might seem high, but you as a Refugee Youth Mentoring Program Coordinator or other caseworker can create materials or share materials on how to navigate that sort of thing. Next, provide guidelines for navigating tough conversations, right? I do want to go back to that idea that mentors are not meant to be licensed clinical social workers or therapists to their paired mentees. That's not necessarily in the role of the mentor. However, we do want to make sure that our mentors, when asked these questions by their mentees, are equipped to be able to navigate them within their role. So being able to listen empathically, being able to refer folks to, say, oh, have you checked out this sort of resource? Have you talked to your caseworker about this? Or if they haven't, you can say, oh, is that something you want me to talk to your caseworker about? Always create space for them to have agency for themselves. And you're not there to be a crisis manager. You're not there. There will always be someone that you can connect with. If you do not know who that is, do contact your resettlement agency or local mentoring organization to be sure that you are connecting with the right people and getting the right resources. Next, you do want to provide training on requirements for your program, such as hour tracking, safeguarding, all of these sorts of things. So some of these things that might be, more logistical or more in terms of policies for your organization, that is really important to make sure that everyone is on the same page about. And do be sure to check in on that throughout the year. Last, it's really important to, within training sessions, also create space to brainstorm and suggest local resources for mentoring activities. It can be really tough to find opportunities that are accessible for in terms of finances, in terms of cultural sensitivity. But in those spaces, you guys can work together to come up with a master list and have folks say, oh, I know that there's a street fair coming up in the next couple of weeks, or oh, there's an event at the public library, it's right on the bus line, or this mentor can offer transportation. So being able to create space to brainstorm and suggest those local opportunities can be really helpful. Now, I know working with mentors is not always rainbows and butterflies. There are challenges that we experience, and we wish we had enough time to dive into these. And as Selina and I were making this presentation, we were like, this could be its own sort of thing. And so we wanted to talk briefly on these common challenges of mentor engagement and let you know that we just put out a blog yesterday where we dive into some of these common challenges. So mentors and mentees may have challenges connecting because of time and logistical issues, whether their schedules are really busy, whether transportation is challenging. They might have challenges in terms of cultural and language barriers. Like I said, limited English proficiency and cross-cultural communication can make those meaningful connections difficult. You might have lack of support from mentees as families who may not understand the premise of the program when a lot of the other programs they're receiving have very tangible benefits in terms of employment or housing and things like that. Mentorship might be a little bit more abstract and harder for them to be on board with, especially when they're like, oh, I need my kids to do well in school. I don't need, what's mentoring going to do for that? But being sure to overcome that with them and talk about that, the benefits of it can be helpful. And last, difficulty identifying meaningful and affordable activities, right? So it can be really difficult to find things that everyone can enjoy together or that are immediately beneficial for your mentees. So like I said, we will not be diving into solutions right now, but we do encourage you to check out the blog that's at the link in the chat for that blog post that Selina put together. And that has some really neat toggle features for how to navigate some of those situations. We hope that you enjoy that blog as well. We're going to move on to some practice of engagement with mentors. So I'm going to turn it back over to Selina.
Thanks, Rob. We are going to jump back into our example with Amina and Naomi. And so if you remember from the first section, we decided Amina and Naomi are going to be our pairing. They have been in a relationship for a couple months now. They're awesome. Amina is excelling in school. Naomi is doing great. But they've run into, in the last couple of weeks, they've run into an issue. So let's read through this case management or case scenario and figure out what we would do. So Amina, our 15-year-old mentee, and her mentor, Naomi, have weekly outings, but Amina has canceled the last 3 meetings. Naomi has asked Amina if there's anything going on, but Amina only gives vague excuses that she is busy in the evenings. As a caseworker, you notice that Naomi is submitting fewer hours in her volunteer reporting. And when you call to check in with Naomi, she shares that she's concerned about Amina and fears that Amina's parents do not have trust in her. You decide to give Amina a call, and she alludes that her parents are being more restrictive of her time and that they think her time spent with Naomi has been frivolous. So what are some of the next steps that you would take to support Amina and Naomi's mentoring relationships? So we're going to go back to the Slido, and y'all can drop some of your answers in here. We'll give you a little bit more time because this is quite a complex question. So what are some next steps that you would take as a case manager or the volunteer coordinator in this situation?
All right, we're loving seeing some of these answers coming in. A lot of focus on talking with parents. That's great. It's very important, that sort of obstacle that we mentioned before, that parents might not understand the premise of the program. They might say, oh, aren't they supposed to be helping my students improve in school? Like, what is this even doing? I like the idea of offering to have a conversation, a group conversation, and setting goals. That can be really helpful to create space to hear out from parents and guardians what they want for their child. That sounds good. Creating space where parents can get to know or understand Naomi's role. Yeah, I mean, even just making sure that the parents know who Naomi is. Maybe they need to spend time together just in general, even not to talk about the program, just to get to know who Naomi is and understand her as a person. And maybe that way the parents can understand the value that Naomi may add to Amina's life. Yeah, suggesting activities that incorporate the family. That's awesome. I like the comment that says, bring Selina in to take care of it. Selina would crush that, I'm sure.
Yeah, so I'll jump in and say some of the things that, so this is a case scenario from some things that I experienced when I was running our mentorship program. I had quite a few situations in this, as you're building a program, you'll run into situations you're like, oh, I didn't even think this would be an issue. And so all of these are awesome ways to approach it. Like Rob mentioned, 39 of you have mentioned parents in your answer. And so something that I don't think that we've talked a lot about, and I think we'll talk more in the Q&A throughout the entire webinar, is the parents' role in this relationship. And so really figuring out where the stem of this issue is in figuring out, are the parents understanding the expectations and the role of the mentorship program in their child's life? And so that's a really great place to start. And so beyond that, so once, say, best case scenario, we have a meeting with the parents, and often they just want their child to succeed. So we meet with the parents and they say, oh, I didn't realize that this was the full scope of the program. The program is new. We've never had something like this in our family before. Great. Let's, maybe pivot. We'd love for Amina and Naomi to focus more on homework. So figuring out if Naomi has weekend availability to meet with the parents, Zoom sessions over lunch, things like this might really help to navigate this and adjust it so the parents are understanding what is going on and what the Amina and Naomi's mentoring relationship is. Because on the front end, we can explain to the parents what this is going to be. But until the mentoring relationship is in action, and when you're dealing with so many different people, every mentoring relationship is going to be different. And so as we navigate that and include the parents in it and say, this is Amina's role, and now, or this is Naomi's role, and now we know more of Amina's needs as we've progressed. And so, but yes, I echo all of the parents and including the family. Those are the top two answers. And so great job on that.
All right, we're going to move on to our final objective, and we have one more engagement opportunity after this. So we're going to talk now about boundaries, closure, and beyond. So we've talked about recruiting and matching. We've talked about how to, in an ongoing way, engage with your mentors. And now we're going to talk about some of the things that can be more challenging, but are incredibly essential. So boundaries, closure, and beyond. We want to start with why boundaries. I think many of us have an idea of, why boundaries are important, but we also know that it can be really hard to sort of maintain, and enforce boundaries in this kind of work where, especially for mentors and mentees, their goal is to get really close and to get really connected. But how do we maintain boundaries while still achieving that goal? First, why boundaries are important is that it builds trust and establishes safety. You have standards in place and you create space for folks to talk about what it is they're comfortable with, what they desire out of the relationship, and how they hope to receive that sort of closeness. And next, it also helps ensure consistent and equitable services. So then that way you are aware of, within the role of the mentor, that all of your mentors are providing the same sorts of services and support and that sort of thing. And of course, it will look different depending on the needs of the clients. But by having boundaries in place of what a mentor is and is not, you're creating space for that consistency. Next, it empowers clients. Hopefully you're creating space for your clients and mentees to also say what their boundaries are. We're not just talking about mentors here. So this way, mentees can say, oh, this is my preference. And it's creating space to say, oh, we're not just throwing this program at you. We're not just saying you have to participate in this way. The clients are able to say, oh, this is the way I feel most comfortable participating. And you can navigate around that to ensure that their boundaries are respected. Boundaries also reduce harm and provide legal protection. Boundaries keep us safe. They keep us from crossing areas in which we have gone from comfort or growth into dangerous zones where we might be re-traumatized, re-triggered, and all sorts of things in that way. And last but not least, it prevents burnout. So boundaries can help us keep from being everything to everyone. Mentors are not meant to be, like I said, everything to their mentee. They're meant to be trusted friends who walk alongside their mentees, but they cannot be everything to everyone. No one can be everything to anyone. So it's really important then, because boundaries can keep us most consistently engaged in this opportunity, and strong mentoring relationships are ones that are consistent. So what does this look like when working with youth mentors? Really important to be intentional about self-disclosure. You as a mentor may be really keen on getting to know your mentee, but it'd also be important to share parts of your own life because otherwise it'll feel sort of very one-sided. And you want to be able to add value to their life through your own experiences, which of course are very rich. However, it's important to be really careful about what it is you're disclosing. Just sort of asking yourself the question, is what I want to share going to be helpful? Is this going to have a positive impact on the youth that I'm working with? If you're unsure, if there's a part of your life that you do want to share with a mentee that feels really personal and you're unsure if it's appropriate to share, check with your youth services manager or someone from your resettlement agency who might be able to inform that. Just creating that space for carefulness will be good. Important also to stay within the scope of your role. Those standards and principles and procedures will protect you as well, to ensure that you have boundaries. You don't just have to say, oh, I don't like this. You can say, oh, this is the policy of the organization that I'm volunteering through. So we need to make sure that we are aligned with them as well. It's important to set clear expectations and have conversations around a couple topics in particular. One is around funds or spending for different activities, right? So when you are operating as a mentor and as a volunteer, you may say, oh, I have some, I might have X amount of money that I'm willing to spend for mentoring activities, but not everyone will have that sort of level of comfort. So it's important to have that conversation, ideally when you're making that match, and say, our organization provides funds for these kinds of activities, but we do not provide funds for others. So being clear about saying, this is what I feel comfortable with as a mentor. And if a mentee makes an ask and says, oh, I want to go to a trampoline park or a laser tag facility, or let's go to a movie, you can ask the Refugee Youth Mentoring Program coordinator if that's appropriate. You can also ask if there's sort of discretionary funding for these sort of social activities and things like that. And if enough people ask, perhaps there's enough of an appetite for everyone to participate. So be really clear about what the expectations are in terms of finances and spending. Next is around communication. Mentors, while they want to be available to their mentees, may not be able to be available 24/7. They should not be a 24/7 helpline. So it's really important to say, hey, this is roughly my schedule. So if you have anything going on during this time, definitely reach out. These are the ways you can reach out to me. You can text me, you can call me. I'd like if we didn't exchange social media at this point, but maybe that can be a conversation down the line. It's going to differ for everyone, what their comfort levels are. and what the best ways to engage are going to be, and make sure that you as a mentor and mentees have space to clarify what their communication preferences are. Next, we want to be intentional about availability and time commitment. Again, sort of has that communication piece in terms of you may not be available at all times. That being said, you can be really intentional about the time that you do create with mentees. So you can say, oh, we can have like a standing weekly check-in via text on Tuesdays, where I'll check in with you then. Or maybe we'll have, the third Friday of every month, we'll go walk around downtown, or we can find some sort of enrichment activity to do together or something like that. By creating sort of consistency and scheduling, that can help with setting expectations and also protecting your time. So beyond the clear expectations around those, we also want to be clear to keep physical contact to a minimum. Many RYM programs do run for youth between the ages of 15 and 24. So particularly important for those under the age of 18 to ensure that we are keeping physical contact to a minimum very intentionally. While many newcomers from other cultures may come from very warm and more physically sort of intimate and comfortable spaces, you as a volunteer are in your role, and we want to make sure that you are respecting practice and protocols in terms of child safeguarding and whatnot. Handshakes, appropriate side hugs, whatever it is that your organization has in practice to protect clients will be important to fall back on there. Last but not least, boundaries may get crossed here and there, and it's important that when they are crossed, that you're enforcing those boundaries gently, but remain firm and consistent. Maybe in the context of the moment of them being crossed, maybe you might not feel comfortable sharing that a boundary has been crossed, but do be sure to return to that conversation and create space to say, hey, when that happened, it fell out of our normal expectations, and I'd like to go back to our normal expectations. I really appreciated that you reached out to me at that time, but I won't be able to reach you then. So I hope you can respect this time bound on when it is that we'll communicate. Last but not least for the section, I want to talk briefly on closure. So closure is something that can, sort of get a bad rap. It's the end of a relationship. However, closure in mentoring is a really natural part. It can be anticipated. Maybe someone says, I am a college student like Isaiah, and he's reaching the end of his time in school, and he's going to be going home or moving for a job. So he knows I'm going to be able to be available until the end of May. So that could be anticipated. There could be unanticipated things where someone has a significant life event that changes their ability to stay committed. These things happen. This is a part of life. And this can also be a great opportunity for mentees, newcomer youth, to experience those sorts of things. However, failing to provide closure can have serious impacts on youth in terms of how they view mentors, how they view authority in their life, how they view and create friendships and relationships that they'll form in the future. So it's really important to create space to very intentionally facilitate closure. So this is something that you can create policies and processes around. So perhaps a suggestion might be to conduct an exit interview. So it might be a group interview where you bring everyone in sort of either the mentoring group or the pair, and you reflect on the past time of mentoring. You say, what are the things you've been able to accomplish? Sit down with their service plan and say, hey, how has your mentor helped you work towards this goal? The mentor, how have you grown in relationship with your mentee? So like I said, taking time to take stock of what it is you've accomplished, but then also create space for maybe individual check-ins to say, what might not have gone well this year? What are ways that we can improve the program? That way folks feel like they have a way to reflect on that relationship and know that it was really meaningful, the connections that they had. And just because it's ending in this formal capacity in your program doesn't mean that it, just because it ends doesn't mean it wasn't meaningful and special. Another idea within those meetings is to create formal agreements for options for continued communication, right? So maybe going back to that idea of someone saying, oh, no social media connections, maybe after participating in the formal mentoring program and they're going to be in another state, they say, you know what, let's get connected on social media. Like maybe we can follow each other on Instagram, or, you can give me your number on WhatsApp, and, stuff like that, where it might be in a more informal setting. It might feel more appropriate when they are moving out of this formal mentoring role into an informal mentoring friendship role beyond that. And it's okay also if someone says, you know what, it's best to just do a clean break, as long as folks are on the same page of what is appropriate and comfortable. Last but not least, you can hold end of year events. So this can be good to celebrate graduation, significant milestones, so on and so forth. That way folks feel sort of, again, that connection piece. We're going to move to our last case scenario.
All right, so we are revisiting Bilal, Isaiah, and Matt and talking about closure and boundaries. So Bilal, our 21-year-old mentee, and his two mentors, Isaiah and Matt, have been meeting once a week for 2 years. This is a very successful pairing. Isaiah and Matt have helped Bilal apply for several jobs and have supported him through his GED studies. Isaiah is preparing to move to graduate college and move back home with his family, who lives 10 hours away. Matt comes to you expressing concerns about being Bilal's sole mentor after being in a group for 2 years. He's sharing that he feels less effective since he is significantly older. All right, so I think for time, we're gonna address one of our questions on this slide. As a caseworker, what would you recommend for Bilal and Matt moving forward? So we'll go to the Slido and let y'all answer. And for the sake of time, I'll talk while y'all are answering as well. And so as a caseworker, one of the things that I would do is have a very open and honest conversation. Like Rob mentioned, closure is of the utmost importance in these situations. And so as Isaiah moves away, I would reassure Matt that his time with Bilal has not been in vain, and that I would reassure them in their relationship. And I see one that is hitting the nail right on the head. Evaluate if Bilal needs more mentoring. That's an awesome one too. Addressing Bilal and say, hey, do you want to be paired with another, or do you want to continue going with Matt? And 2 years is a really great amount of time. And maybe Bilal is feeling like, I have a job now, I'm finishing up my GED studies. I actually might need myself to take a step away from the mentorship program and maybe move more into a friendship relationship with Matt and Isaiah, or not. And so addressing all of the parties in the situation is very, very important, in having that conversation very, very forward, and maybe helping Matt figure out whether he wants to be repaired or if they want to continue their mentorship relationship in a different and new, exciting capacity. And so for the sake of time, that will be our last question. And some of these are awesome answers, discussing future plans, asking about interests. Y'all have this. You're great coordinators. You got it. But yeah, thank you.
All right, last but not least, we do have a couple questions that we've been saving towards the end. They're really, really good ones. So I might have time for just one of them real quick. But I will note also that my colleague Megan in the chat has dropped our feedback survey. So I know we're close to time. If anyone does need to leave, you are able to do that, but please take a couple seconds to fill out our feedback survey as you are able. We might go a touch over to answer some of these questions. So if you're particularly interested in hearing what your fellow participants have asked, feel free to stay on. But one of our questions that I want to draw attention to, and Selina, we can both answer this one, but I'm going to direct it to you first. For a virtual program, how would you support a pairing that is unable to have productive sessions due to noise, family dynamics during tutoring sessions? They've already tried talking to the parents, they've tried changing the schedule. What might you do in a situation like that?
Great question, Rob. That is not the question that I was going to go with first. I'm going to pivot it back to you, because honestly, Fernan, I also would be pretty perplexed in this. But Rob, when we were at World Relief, he was the rock star of our virtual programming. My mentor programming was virtual for a while, but they were significantly older. I didn't really have too many of those issues. So Rob, back to you.
Yeah, thanks so much. I think one of my first thoughts is to look at, even if we're not having consistent Zoom calls, what are ways that you can still sort of stay connected with folks in your life? So maybe it could be moving to a situation in which you're communicating with voice notes. That was something that can be really helpful, especially for folks who really need that sort of conversational thing where, texting might not work, but you might say, oh, we can do voice notes or like video notes or things like that. moving things to a very asynchronous setting can be helpful. Another idea here might be, if someone's having challenges with their homework, if that student could take a picture of the assignment that they're working on or send it in an email or something like that to the mentor, that mentor might be able to make comments or feedback or make a video showing how they might approach the situation. So then that way it's less live. I know that's really challenging, but that might be a sort of a quick fix. Another idea might be to create space for that Refugee Youth Mentoring Program Coordinator to talk with the family. And I know there are some limitations there. There might be limitations in space at the home. There might be limitations in terms of childcare and things like that. And I know you said you already tried talking to the parents, but are there alternative spaces where that student can attend, can get to, looking for ways to empower also the youth to see what it is they might be able to think of in terms of changes. If those things aren't feasible, then again, it might be a matter of wanting to discuss with teachers at school, discussing with caseworkers about, is this a really tenable solution and is there anything that can be done there? So asking for help is a great way to navigate that. For now, and I know, like we said, that's a tough question. It's really, really tough, and virtual mentoring can be tough when you have those disruptions. But yeah, I hope that helps and answers your question at least a bit. Selina, did you want to take one of the other questions?
Yeah, and I will say those were some of the things that naturally happened, as we navigated COVID and not being able to meet. And so thank you so much for addressing that. Yeah, I'd love to address one of Bruce's questions. So many clients of Afghan Coalition are experiencing generational distancing within their family. How can mentoring strengthen the family? And then secondary, what role do parents have in the selection of a mentor for their teenager? As I mentioned earlier, I think that one thing that we were able to dive fully into is the parents' role in this, which is crucial. And I am so thankful for this question because I think mentoring can strengthen the entire family unit. Obviously, our mentorship programs are for 15 to 24-year-olds if they're ORR funded. And so if you're working with that age group and young adults, teenagers, that often it is of the utmost importance to have trusted adults in the youth's relation or youth life that aren't parents. And often when parents, for me, in our situation, when parents were approached with this opportunity to have a vetted, trusted adult that is specifically focused on their teenager, it feels like a weight taken off of their shoulders. This is for the most of my parents, at least. Some are hesitant of like, I've never had this situation outside of teachers. This is interesting. This is different. But for the majority of our parents, they were like, yes, finally, we have someone who isn't us. I'll be frank as well, like teenagers often listen to adults outside of the family, maybe have a different ear for them than the parents. So I know that was my experience and every single teenager I've ever worked with, of like mom says one thing and then mentor says it, same exact thing. Oh, wow, it clicks with another trusted adult. And so for that reason, mentoring can really strengthen the family and the parental relationship when communication is very strong between all parties. The mentor can really understand some of the struggles that the parents are having, if there are any, or, even back that of like, hey, the mentee might be struggling with school. The parent can, address that with the program coordinator or depending on the relationship with the mentor themselves, and then feel like they have additional support with their teenager. Therefore, they have, a stronger relationship with their teenager because they know that they're not the only one that is rooting for the teenager to have a positive experience. I think overall, that's what I experienced of the mentor strengthening the family. Beyond that, depending on your program and depending on your agency's approach to this, the mentor often, like I said earlier, becomes this role of a trusted outsider in the family. And so say when the parents have a question that maybe is just an additional hurdle to ask the case manager, or they've been waiting, as case managers, we are not only working with one family. And so when the mentor is at the house picking up the mentee, often what I experience is the parents would say, hey, real quick, I have this one question about this electric bill. And while it depends on your program, whether or not, that's within the boundaries or the scope, but that is another way that the mentor can strengthen the family and just the family's experience as newcomers, of saying, oh, wow, there's community here that's helping me. So that's what I would say in my experience. That's how the mentoring in general strengthened the family. And then what role did parents have in the selection? So for me, as I've mentioned a couple times, there's no one size fits all program. Everybody that I met in 2019 when I started my program was doing things differently. They were all we were all brand new to the program. So really there's no one size fits all. But for our program, I would do an intake on the very front end of the program. And that would be a sit down with the mentee and the mentors, or with the mentee and the mentee's family. And just to explain the new program, explain what the mentor would be doing, explain what the parents' expectations are of the mentee or the mentor, and the mentee's expectations of the mentor. And so that was really crucial. I was very, very lucky to have my program starting pre-COVID. And so I was able to have dinner with these families. Often it was after hours, but as we all know, that's typically something that, just naturally happens. It was after school, and I would meet with them, and that was so crucial for some of the most successful pairings, because the parents knew what was going on. And often I never ran into a situation that parents didn't like the mentee or the mentor that I selected for their mentee. But I can imagine, now that these programs are several years into it, I'm sure that could happen. So just open communication. But yeah, definitely involving the parents from the get is very important.
All right, thank you, Selina, and thanks to those who answered questions. Again, we won't have time to answer all of these. We're definitely over time, so if you do have to drop off, feel free, but thank you for these questions. We're gonna wrap up here right about now and review our learning objectives. Hopefully now you are able to determine these factors for matches, identify successful strategies for engagement, and apply practical skills to address challenging topics like boundaries and case closure. Again, I want to just share this. We already put the link in the chat for feedback, but you can also scan this QR code and provide feedback. It takes less than 30 seconds, and it's essential to helping us improve our ongoing training and technical assistance. If there is a question that you didn't have answered, feel free to drop that in the survey feedback form as well. Often this can inform future sessions and future trainings that we have. If there's a topic that you want us to dive deeper into or anything like that, please let us know. We're really open to feedback. Additionally, as a one-stop resource hub, we do provide training and technical assistance to ORR-funded organizations. So if you would benefit from more conversations specifically with your team, please submit a technical assistance request with us, and we would be happy to explore what that could look like as we support your team. We do have quite a list of recommended resources. There are a number of folks working in the space of mentoring with immigrant and other newcomer youth. So as we said, we did put in that blog post for advice for mentors who work with newcomer youth. We do encourage you to read that, as well as all of the other resources here. Definitely check out the National Mentoring Partnership, mentoring.org, and also BRICS, Bridging Refugee Youth and Children Services, has plenty of resources as well. We will be sending these in a follow-up email, again with the recording and the transcript, and you can share those, and they'll also be posted on our website. Last but not least, please stay connected with Switchboard. We are easy to reach at our email, switchboard@rescue.org, and you can find more out about our services on switchboardta.org. You can check out our resource library, which has hundreds of resources for you who are working with refugees and other newcomers. Just wanted to say thank you so much for attending our session today, and thank you for the vital work that you do in this sector. We really appreciate you, and we hope to see you for a future learning opportunity.